If you're anything like me, you remember coming home, checking the mailbox, and finding the Dell catalog in there, which gave you something to do for like a solid hour while you reveled in the newest technology and the coolest creations and honestly some of the greatest computers of that time. And also, you probably saw this, the Dell Digital Jukebox, or the Dell DJ. This is a 15 gigabyte spinning disc audio player that I personally think is Dell's best example of copy Apple's homework and change it a little bit. They were so late to the game, and I think they missed the mark every single time. Now, this isn't a bad music player. Honestly, it's pretty solid. It'll play your MP3s, it'll play your WMA files, protected and unprotected. It had its own media management system, like everything of the time period did. The iPod, obviously its biggest competitor, and you had to use iTunes for your iPod. But this is probably a very solid competitor for a first generation iPod. This came out in 2004 though, so it was competing with the third generation iPod, and the Dell DJ doesn't even come close to a third generation iPod, especially when the fourth gen was right around the corner with its color screen. But it's got some redeeming qualities, so let's jump in. There were two versions of the DJ when it came out, a 15 gigabyte model for $249, this one, and a 20 gigabyte model for $299. A quick tour of the DJ. We've got an interface that is very iPod-like, and it's also based on, or really is, a Creative Nomad MP3 player. So it has the exact same interface on screen that you would find in all the Creative players. An interface that spanned generations, and they just kept right on using it so you could always tell what you were using almost immediately. On the front, we have a scroll wheel here, which is meant to kind of reproduce the iPod's click wheel there, and it does work. You can push in for select and you can scroll up and down just like that. You've got a back button, you've got a home button to take you all the way back to the main menu. You've got play, pause, track forward, and track back. On the side, we've got a power button that does light up the entire time the player is on. It lights up blue. All the lights on the player are blue, in fact, but this one stays on. And due to it being an old consumer electronics product, if you look through the top sometimes, you can actually see that blue LED glowing through the ports. Underneath the power button, we've got volume up, volume down, and a microphone button. That dedicated microphone button fires up the built-in voice recorder, which uses the microphone right here on the top of the player. Beside the microphone, we have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack with its 8-pin remote interface. And it seems like every player had a remote interface back in the day. Obviously, it was cool, and secondly, it was hard to take something this big out of your pocket, so if you were running or something like that, you wanted to have a nice little remote. You need to be able to control your track, play, pause, volume, and the one for the Dell also had a hold switch on it. Beside the remote jack, we've got a USB mini port that is USB 1.1 and 2.0 compatible for that high speed. And right beside that, we have a physical hold switch that does flip on and off and indicates red when it's on hold. Over here on the other side, opposite the power button, we have a barrel connector to charge this thing, although you can charge the DJ via USB, with one caveat. If the player battery is low enough, like below 25%, it no longer charges via USB, and you have to switch to its barrel connector to charge it. On the back of the player, it's screen printed with 15 gigabytes, the FCC ID, all that good stuff, and the most Dell thing about the player there is. First, we've got a service tag. On this one, it's 8SG8D31, and then we have the express service code. And if you were in IT or worked on Dells, set up Dells during this time period, you know how amazing the express service tag was. You could hop on Dell's website, throw that code in there, and find out everything about the computer you were working on, or at least how it was originally configured, instantly, and it would get you support. Everything about this label was amazing, and it's the reason we love Dell. I mean, the only vendor to really even come close to that these days is Apple. If you put in an Apple serial number, you know everything about the machine immediately. And Dell was really crushing the game with their customer support and service tags. So that might be the best thing about this player, and obviously it is the most Dell thing about it since the player is in fact a Creative Nomad. Inside, this thing is powered by a single Texas Instruments DSP that's also acting as the CPU for this. It's running the whole show, and it does work, but I think it might have maybe a very cheap DSP or something like that. I have listened to a few of these tracks, and there's some clicking in them, and obviously very noisy MP3 compression. They could have been bad MP3 files that were upsampled to 128K from 32 or something like that. I'm not sure why, but it doesn't actually sound that great. I don't think it's on par with like the burr browns you'd find in an iPod. But it works, it plays music, and most people would never notice. So 15 gigabytes, that would get you about 7,500 songs. And with USB 2.0, if you were transferring on a full load of music, all 15 gigabytes, it would take about 2 hours to transfer. It could also be an external hard drive. That was, a feature that everybody had to have back in the day. And personally, I have used these music players as external hard drives. It was nice because we didn't have massive cheap flash storage like we do today, so this would get you by in a pinch. And it was probably more space than you had anywhere else. The only problem with that is if you upload music to the mass storage side of the device, same thing with the iPod, you cannot listen to it. It will not browse those folders, kind of sectioned off as a separate part of the device. You have to upload music to this via Music Match or Dell DJ Explorer. Obviously, no different than its main competitor at the time, the iPod, although there were plenty of other players that existed at this time that you could just drag and drop files onto and it would play the MP3 back. Now, this player is huge compared to a modern anything, and this is an iPod Classic beside it for comparison. Obviously, generations and generations newer, but both of these do have spinning hard drives in them, and this one holds 160 gigs in about half the space. So the form factors, they sure stayed the same. The iPod was always just a little bit smaller, but its main competitor, of course, the 3rd gen iPod only had 8 hours of playtime on battery, which is dismal compared to the Dell, which they advertised as 16. And it was commonly hitting 19.5 hours, almost 20 hours. That's 2 days of actually listening to music, possibly 3, possibly a week, 20 hours of playtime out of this thing because it has a giant battery in there. So good on Dell for blowing away the expectations there. All right, let's get into the 1st generation DJ here. This has a blue LED backlight along with every other light on it that does turn on. When you touch any button, move the scroll wheel, whatever you need to do there, it will light up, and the backlight can be controlled in the settings, kind of cool. It stays on for 5 seconds right now. Contrast is 50%, you can control that. It can automatically shut down if it's idling, and you can pick a time period there, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. You can change the language. The only setting is English. So why is that even an option there? There's a reset all settings in there, and we're gonna scroll back up to the most important part of the menu, EQ settings. Now I have it on custom EQ. The custom EQ is flat. You can also turn it all the way off. And there are built-in presets for acoustic, classical, disco, jazz, new age, pop, rock, vocal, and there's return down there at the bottom. If you open up custom EQ, you can see we have a 4-band graphic equalizer, and I feel like that's probably the most worthless equalizer ever made unless you just want a bass boost around that 80-100 hertz range. It doesn't tell you what the Q is. You're just turning up maybe just one specific frequency band, 100 hertz. You don't know how wide it is. 100, 800, 3 kilohertz, and 12 kilohertz. Those were your options there in the graphic equalizer. Hey, at least it gave you some options, but a 7-band would have been nice. Down here in information, we have the version, the software version it's running on, 100.09. Total space, 14,338 megabytes. That is 15 gigs. And the 55 songs on there are only taking up about 200 megabytes. 8 albums, 1 playlist. It counts everything out for you, so you can find out how many songs you have in an instant. I'm working up from the bottom of the menu because it's the best part of the menu, and as you get into the music library, it becomes quite a bit more spotty. Here in voice recordings, I have a quick voice recording, and we'll play it back so you can hear how it sounds. The issue is the hard drive is spinning when the voice recording, at least when it starts, and it has to write to the hard drive as well, so that onboard microphone that's soldered onto the same board that's touching the hard drive picks up the hard drive's vibrations. And you can really, really hear the hard drive run, click, spin, everything about it is in the recording. So probably not the voice recorder you wanted if you were a news reporter, but quick notes, it's got your back. Now let's listen to the voice recording I made so you can hear that hard drive spinning.
This is what a voice recording sounds like on the Dell Digital Jukebox.
Here in play mode, we've got normal, repeat track, repeat all, shuffle, repeat, and track once. We've got a now playing section, just like the iPod. You can click current track or selected music, and it's currently playing. You don't have to call. And let's go ahead and click current track, and it goes all the way into the now playing screen with the 8701 Usher album. Now, for the music library, we've got playlists, and there is new playlist 1 on there. Let's take a look at the tracks. Hopefully it's every song on the player, but instead it's no songs. So we're gonna go down to albums, and we can find 8701, After the Storm, Country Grammar, Pandemonia, and recordings. Is this the voice recordings? Let's take a look. It sure is. So you can also go through albums to find the recording that you've made on the player. There's an all song selection, just like the iPod and iTunes. This is really, really a copy of the iPod, but not a very good one because of this one simple thing. We're gonna go to artists. We're gonna pick B2K, and then we're gonna go to view tracks because obviously I want a specific track, and it shouldn't give you a play option for the artist. It should automatically drill into the tracks as the iPod does. And then we have tracks, which are unlabeled because somebody ripped them as 128K MP3s from a CD or something like that. And honestly, they're very poor quality CD rips. And you click on the scroll wheel again to hit play. Now on the iPod, if you clicked on a track, it would have already started playing instantly. That's just how it should work. It should be simple. But this adds a bunch of extra key presses that you don't need. It works, but it's not as intuitive as the iPod. Now, while I don't like having a submenu pop up when I want to play a track, I do enjoy scrolling down and seeing view track details. Also, delete track. Obviously, you can't delete tracks on the iPod at the time. So you click on the track and you get the duration, the genre, you get to see all the ID3 info, and it will also show the MP3 bit rate and kilohertz. Unfortunately, it's not doing it now. Well, the ID3 info is in there, but it's not gonna pop up for me this time. So we're gonna go check out Find Artist, which is a quick shortcut to scroll through the entire alphabet of artists. Obviously, if you end up with 1,000 different songs by 1,000 different artists, it could be very hard to find the artist you want. So there is a quick way to scroll to the artist you want. So if I was looking for Nelly, I would click in and it would go straight to the ends. There's obviously only one on here. It's Nelly. Well, there you have it. The Dell DJ. As always, when there's a bandwagon, Dell finds a way to get on it. They always have music players, phones, PDAs. They won't stay in their lane with desktops and laptops. They are determined to make every consumer electronic they can. And this is another example of it. They slap their name on the Creative Nomad. Okay, it works. And the interface is usable by anyone without having to pull out a manual or anything like that. It definitely does exactly what it's advertised to do, but it misses the mark just a little bit. At the same time, I remember opening up the Dell catalog and wanting this more than anything. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching Tech Throwback, and I can't wait to see you on the next one.